In the crucible of chaos, where the heavens weep and the earth trembles, his blade dances with a primal elegance, the edge kissed by the furies of battle. A warrior, resolute and fierce, standing as a sentinel of valor, his heart aflame with the fire of purpose, because each blade tells a story, etched with the scars of countless skirmishes. Bear witness to the symphony of steel, becoming a living legend bound by destiny, carrying with him the stories of sacrifices, engraved forever in his blade, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who dare to stand and fight. His name is Excalibur.
What's good, folks? It's Nightmare Frame here with a new Warframe video coming at you with Excalibur builds. At long last, some update to the poster boy, and currently the only Warframe in the game to have both an Exalted and Pseudo-Exalted. I'm going to provide you with 4 different builds. However, a small disclaimer, the builds will not be run on Excalibur Umbra because of his anti-synergy mechanic done by DE and bugs, meaning he ruins all the builds. To understand this anti-synergy, let's go over the passives. So there are 3 variants of Excalibur. You have your Prime, which was an exclusive Founder Pack item, the regular Excal you get as a starter, and Excalibur Umbra, a new type of Warframe variant unique to Excalibur. The main stat difference is the regular versus the other variants, as Umbra and Prime share the same stats. Excalibur's passive allows him to gain 10% damage and attack speed to swords. The bonuses you get are additive to your melee base damage and attack speed mods, so pretty much not that noticeable. However, Umbra has another passive, and it's his Sentience. When you transference out of your frame, your Warframe gains the ability to move and attack on its own. However, this is where the anti-synergy comes in. When you transference out with any active Helminth ability, Umbra will deactivate them, not put them on pause or anything, but completely deactivate them, having you recast the ability yet again. And transference is part of our normal gameplay flow, because Operator, Arcanes, and Focus Schools exist, and having our Helminth ability deactivated ruins the flow of the builds. Would be nice if the ability was disabled while the duration was still running, so when we transference back in, it continues with its remaining duration. Not to mention, Umbra also deactivates his own ability buffs. For example, Furious Javelin, a melee damage buff, gets completely removed when you transference.
So, normally, 62. With Javelin, we got 37% increase. That's 85. All right, go in and out. Back to 62.
It's not a visual bug, but it actually gets removed, meaning you lose damage using a passive that cucks your damage. Alongside his anti-synergy, this Sentience can get you killed because the Warframe retains your stats. However, he's very stupid and could run into enemies you don't want to engage just yet. This makes it very annoying to use with specific builds, hence why I use the regular Excalibur instead. And for the people who have Excal Prime, congrats, you have the best version of Excalibur. And guess what? Umbra Forma exists, so you can make a better Umbra. Now, onto the first ability, Slash Dash. This is a pseudo-exalted ability, meaning it scales from combo multiplier, Warframe mods, and equipped melee mods. To maximize the damage of this ability, you're going to need a stat stick. This ability has 0 crit and status stats. However, it force proc slash on its attack. Casting this ability will have you dash straight forward. However, casting it into a group of enemies will have him ping back and forth between enemies within his line of sight, until you lose sight or reach of enemies, or if they're all just dead. You can cancel the animation by jumping or rolling out of it. During this animation, your health is immune to damage, but shields are still vulnerable. Radial Howl or Radial Blind, the second ability. Excalibur releases an AoE burst of energy that stuns and blinds enemies, and the affected targets are open to finishers and susceptible to stealth multiplier damage. Excalibur will only blind enemies within line of sight or once seen. Radial Javelin, the third ability. This has Excalibur stab the ground, launching javelins that impale enemies. Targets affected will be dealt with IPS damage and have guaranteed slash procs. At the same time, the enemies that don't die are briefly stunned. This ability by itself is pretty useless and redundant, and only sees actual use when using its augment, Furious Javelin. Hitting enemies will grant your melee a final damage multiplier, similar to Eclipse, and it scales off strength and the amount of enemies hit. Finally, Exalted Blade, the original Exalted weapon. Excalibur draws out an energy sword and wields it as the main equipped weapon. You can still switch to your guns, but it takes over your melee slot. The damage it deals is IPS, with its main damage being slash. The weapon has 15% crit chance, 2 times critical multiplier, and 15% status chance. Yeah, the weapon has garbage stats. Since this is an Exalted weapon, it scales with strength, warframe arcanes, and the mods that you equip on it. Pretty much anything except acolyte mods, so no blood rush or weeping wounds. The ability is also a channeling ability, which drains energy over time. Also, performing a slight attack while your Exalted Blade is active will release a mini Radial Blind. It has an augment called Chromatic Blade, which converts the IPS damage into an element. This element corresponds to the emissive color in your appearance tab. On top of that, it increases the status chance that also scales with strength. Alright, now that you know how his kit works, so let's start off with the build requirements. This is where I go over the Archon Shards and Arcanes for the builds. Starting with the Archon Shards, you have 2 options here. Either go with 4 regular Crimson Shards for the strength to balance out builds, or you can go all in on 5 Crimson Tauforge for the critical damage, to give you 187.5% melee crit damage. This damage increase is very good, as it increases the DPS of all the builds, since they're melee focused. Unfortunately, Mesa has all my red Tauforge shards, so I went for strength increase instead, which is still pretty solid because it opens up more flexibility with the rest of the builds. And I have 1 amber Tauforge for the bonus effective on energy pickup. Operator Arcanes with Magus Elevate to heal you when you transference. And Magus Anomaly pulls in enemies within a 30-meter radius when you transference back into your warframe. My secondary weapon to prime enemies will be the Epitaph, modded for viral and heat, to debuff enemies while increasing my melee damage. The Quickfire also force procs Cold to slow down enemies and increase your critical damage, and it also force procs Blast to reduce enemies' accuracy. The focus school that I'll be using for all the builds will be Matter-Eye, mostly for power transfer, granting me 50% casting speed upon transference back into my warframe. Additionally, you have Sling Strength. You can use the strength increase to snapshot 40% strength to your Furious Javelin and Exalted Blade for even more damage. The first build, a build that people will definitely enjoy the most, and stays true to Excalibur, the Red Crit Exalted Blade build, using the Helminth Wrathful Advance from Kullervo. Activating this ability will cause you to teleport to an enemy for an instant heavy attack, and grants you a flat 100% crit chance, which scales off strength. This is where the Red Tauforge melee crit damage could be a bigger DPS increase to multiply the damage when you crit. However, with the strength shards, I'm able to balance out the build to grant me enough strength to get consistent red crits. 40% strength from shards along with 155% modded strength and 60% strength for the Molt Augmented Arcane after 250 kills. All of this accumulated strength grants me a total of 255% flat critical chance. Sacrificial Steel on my Exalted Blade makes it have 48% crit chance. Add a flat 255% on that, I gain 303% crit chance. This brings you to a tier 3 crit, meaning guaranteed red crits. With my duration, I gain 15 seconds of this buff. So if you want to increase your DPS with crit damage shards, you would only sacrifice 3 seconds to mod additional strength on the build, using Transient Fortitude. The other arcane is going to be Arcane Reaper. Melee kills grant me 24 healing per second, and 660 armor. Yes, this is going to be a health tanking build. So, taking a look at said build. Corrosive Rejection in the aura for the 18% armor strip to everything within a 50-meter radius. Prime Sure-Footed for the knockdown and stagger resistance. Strength and health with the 2 Umbra mods granting me 155% and 850 health, but with the Strength Shards equipped, I gain 195%. The 2 augment Furious Javelin for the final melee damage multiplier. Chromatic Blade to convert my Exalted Blade into an elemental weapon and increase the status chance. Prime Continuity grants me 15 seconds on Wrathful Advance and 24 seconds on Furious Javelin. Equilibrium for the Orb pickup conversion. This pairs well with the synth set mods on your companion, but you can substitute this mod with Hunter Adrenaline since this is a health tanking build. Physical contact hits do grant Exalted Blade combo counter. It does not increase its damage, but increases the damage when you cast Wrathful Advance, since it turns your attacks into a heavy attack. So perfect when you one-tap Acolytes. For the Exalted Blade builds, just remember to change your emissive color, set it to the reds or yellows for the heat damage, because I'll be modding my Exalted Blade with Corrosive. Condition Overload for the bonus base damage on enemies affected with multiple unique status effects, and Berserker for the 75% increase in attack speed. Sacrificial Steel is our only crit chance increase that we can mod onto this weapon. The 2 crit damage mods to multiply all the damage when we crit, and this is going to be red crits. Even though I have Gladiator Might on the weapon, it does not grant me the set bonus. And of course, raw elemental damage. Simple and clean build. Build number 2 is going to utilize the first ability, Slash Dash. As I stated earlier, this ability cannot crit, yet I am red critting here. This is due to the synergy with Ceramic Dagger Incarnate, using the final evolution perk, Absolute Valor, which grants this weapon 30% flat crit chance, which also applies to pseudo-exalted weapons, currently. As pseudo-exalteds are abilities that scale from multiple parts of your arsenal and usually need a stat stick to increase its damage. The Ceramic Dagger was a perfect fit. The Helminth ability on this build can be Silence. It's for the stun increasing your survivability, enemy special ability Shutdown, and stealth damage multiplier. Or you can use Roar to increase your ability and weapon damage while also allowing Slash Dash bleeds to double dip, as pseudo-exalted do not scale with faction mods, and Roar will be your universal faction mod. And finally, Zata's Whisper, the one I use. This works as a survivability and a damage increasing tool, and counts as 2 hits with any of your regular strikes. The survivability portion is that it creates void bubbles around the enemies that you're priming before attacking. These bubbles are bullet attractors, basically returning the enemy's shots right back at them. For more information about this ability, check out this video. For my Arcanes, I have Arcane Fury for the 180% melee base damage and Arcane Guardian. Basically, when you take damage, you have 16% chance to gain 900 armor. Alright, let's take a look at the build. Steel Charge in the aura for the 60% melee base damage. Strength with Umbra Intensify and Archon Shards, which gives me a total of 184% strength. 2 Gladiator mods for the health and armor, but they also have a set bonus, granting me crit chance as you build up combo, like a second Blood Rush. These 2 will be paired with another one on my melee. Speaking of which, let's take a look at that melee build. The Ceramic Dagger modded for raw damage, elemental damage, and crits. Very simple and straightforward. So, with the 3 Gladiator mods, Blood Rush, Sacrificial Steel, and Absolute Valor, all of this will grant my Slash Dash 327% crit chance, meaning guaranteed red crits on Slash Dash. Build number 3 is a finisher build using Radial Blind with its augment. Enemies affected by the second ability take increased finisher damage, and I'm going to be pairing this up with Marked for Death. This ability comes from the Helminth system itself. You cast this ability on an enemy, stunning that target and marking it for death. Killing this marked target will distribute a portion of that damage in the area within line of sight. And this damage portion caps out at 150% and scales off ability strength. The damage cannot exceed the target's remaining health, meaning you gotta select a chunky, healthy boy to spread the damage for it to actually deal damage. Also, for my melee, I'm going to pair it up with a Rapier. Rapiers will proc slash on directional finishers, and since Marked for Death spreads damage, when you perform a finisher on an enemy while they are marked for death, you will end up spreading bleeds to all enemies that take Marked for Death damage. So if an enemy survives from Marked for Death, they will bleed to death. And the best part is that for elite enemy units like Acolytes or even someone like Corrupted Vor, you just have to deal damage to regular enemy units, and you deal AoE bleed damage to enemies around you. pretty much killing elite units passively. For the Arcanes, I'm using Arcane Trickery. You have a 15% chance to become invisible for 30 seconds upon a finisher kill. This invisibility isn't an ability, so it cannot be nullified or removed by nullifiers or violence. This Arcane used to be more consistent with Mark for Death, but of course, that was toned down. Second Arcane is Arcane Fury for the 180% increase in melee base damage when I crit. Alright, let's take a look at the build. Enemy radar and the aura for the consistent enemy pings on the map. Range at 175% with stretch and reach. This extends my Radial Blind radius to 43 meters and Mark for Death explosion to 17 meters. Strength at 224% with Umbra Intensify, Crimson Shards, and Sling Strength. This gives my Radiant Finish 672% finisher damage, and Mark for Death caps out to 150%. Prime Flow and Fleeting Expertise for the energy pool and energy cost reduction. Primed Continuity to counteract the loss in duration, so I still have 14 seconds on Radial Blind. Now, onto my Destreza Prime, modded for finishers. Since I have 672% finisher damage, I don't need to mod for Finishing Touch on my melee, freeing up a mod slot for even more damage and utility. The build is straightforward: raw damage, faction mods, crits, and elemental damage, as all of these factor into your final finisher damage. Quickening does affect 33% of my finisher animation speed, making it slightly faster. And not only that, quickening also helps you build up combo faster for even more damage and crits. Alright, now onto the final build. This build is simulating Wisp with Eclipse for crazy damage with Exodia Contagion, using the Furious Javelin augment for the multiplicative damage increase on my melees. The Helminth is Breach Surge to spread the damage in the AoE. To learn more about Breach Surge, do go check out my Wisp Prime video. For the Arcanes on this build, I'm using Arcane Arachne for the 150% multiplicative scaling on your Contagion projectiles. It does not work on the normal melee attacks, only on the projectiles. Perform a quick wall latch to gain the buff for 30 seconds. My DPS weapon is a Zaw. You can use any Zaw strike you want. It's pretty much personal preference. The most important part is the link and the grip to influence your crits and base damage. Alright, let's take a look at the build. Steel Charge the Aura for the melee base damage. Duration 152% with Prime Continuity and Augur Message. This gives Furious Javelin 24 seconds. Simple build. Pull in enemies with Anomaly, Javelin, Prime, jump and release your Contagion. And don't forget to wall latch every 30 seconds to refresh your Arachne buff. Now, onto the melee build. To maintain combo counter, I am using 2 Dexterity Arcanes on both my primary and secondary. This increases my combo duration, giving me 20 seconds. Watch people skip this part. Again. And now onto the Zaw. I'm using a Bala, along with the Peye Grip and Varjeet Chujai Link. Raw damage, crit chance, crit damage, and your faction mod to increase the damage you're dealing to that faction. Just remember to hit enemies with a regular melee strike to maintain your combo. Otherwise, that's it. It's a pretty simple loadout. Alright folks, these are the Excalibur builds. Until DE fixes Umbra, these builds are just going to be hella copium and annoying to maintain on that warframe. Anyway folks, that has been it from me. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, feel free to leave a like, share, and
subscribe
for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace. Bye-bye now.